Hello everyone, let's very quickly go through the parasympathetic ganglions located in our head and neck area. As we know, there are four major ones. One is your ciliary, then is your pterygopalatine, one is your otic, and another one is your submandibular. Yeah, so these are the four major ones, parasympathetic ganglions located in our head and neck area. So as we know, there are three or four nerves related to all these ganglions. One is your these are basically there are four nerves which carries parasympathetic out of your head and neck area. Those are, as we all know, those are your 3, 7, 9, 10. Yeah, but in this case, the 10 one, the vagus one, we want to talk about the vagus nerve, because vagus nerve is not supplying mainly it basically supplies in your gastric area and heart area and thoracic area and all those areas. So since we are just talking about the head and neck area, we will just talk about we will exclude the vagus nerve, and we will just talk about your 3, 7, 9. So as we know, the third one is your oculomotor, seventh is your facial nerve, and ninth is your glossopharyngeal nerve. So let's start with your ciliary ganglion. So as we know, ciliary ganglion. First of all, before starting these ganglions, one must be familiar with few terms. One is your functional nerve, one is your topographic or structural nerve. So what's the difference? The functional nerve is the one which carries your preganglionic fibers, and the structural or topographic nerve is the one which carries your postganglionic fibers. Yeah, it's just supporting the ganglion. Yeah, it just supports the ganglion. It doesn't have no function related to the ganglion or related to the glands which are being supplied. So it just simply carries the postganglionic fibers, nothing else. So this concept will remain for all the ganglions, and so we must know two nerves. One would be for each ganglion. One would be your is functional nerve, and one would be your structural nerve. So in case of ciliary ganglion, we have the functional nerve, which is the oculomotor nerve, cranial nerve 3, and we have the nasociliary nerve, which is a branch of your mandibular nerve. Yeah, and one more thing to remember is very important is all your postganglionic fibers would be carried through your trigeminal nerve, whether it's your ophthalmic branch, your maxillary branch, or mandibular branch of a mandibular nerve, doesn't matter. The postganglionic fibers would always be inside your trigeminal nerve. So in this case, we have V1, that is ophthalmic nerve of the trigeminal nerve, ophthalmic branch of trigeminal nerve, or ophthalmic nerve of trigeminal nerve. To be more precise, the nasociliary nerve of your ophthalmic nerve, that is of V1. Yeah, so nasociliary is coming out of your ophthalmic nerve, that is V1. So since we are talking about the parasympathetic ganglions, let's discuss about just the nucleuses of the parasympathetic ganglions. I won't discuss about the motor nucleuses because they aren't relevant in this topic. So oculomotor nerve, as we know, the parasympathetic nucleus, is named as Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which is located in your midbrain. So here is your preganglionic fibers coming out of your oculomotor nerve, coming inside your oculomotor nerve, carried through your oculomotor nerve, and synapsing here in your in your ciliary ganglion, and postganglionic fibers are carried through your nasociliary nerve. Yeah, nasociliary nerve, to be more precise, is the short nasociliary nerve. Yeah, for the exam purposes, if you want to know. And here I have drawn trigeminal ganglion is the V1, is the ophthalmic branch, ophthalmic nerve of the trigeminal nerve. Yeah, which is being which is giving a branch named as nasociliary nerve, which carries towards your ciliary muscles. Yeah, so this is your ciliary ganglion and is functional nerve and functional nerve and your structural nerve. Now let's talk about the pterygopalatine ganglion. Here we can see we have the pterygopalatine ganglion. Again, we have a functional nerve, and functional nerve over here is your facial nerve, cranial nerve 7, and here we have the structural nerve. Again, as I already mentioned, it should be your trigeminal nerve, but in this case we have the maxillary nerve of the trigeminal nerve. Yeah, that is V2. So Let's start. Here I've drawn midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Sorry, it should have been in the pons area, but not in the midbrain. But never mind. This is your motor nucleus. This is your sensory nucleus of your of your facial nerve. To be more precise, since we are discussing about the your parasympathetic nucleus, we are talking about the superior solitary nucleus here in this case. This is your motor nucleus taking a turn because there's the abducens nucleus over here, but it's not relevant. We won't talk about the motor nucleus anymore. So here's your superior solitary nucleus, the parasympathetic nucleus of your cranial nerve 7, sensory one, cranial nerve 7, yeah, facial nerve. And here we have this one, the sensory fibers, also known as the nerve to intermedius, nerve intermedius of the facial nerve, which is the sensory fiber, which is having the sensory fibers. This one connects with your unites with your motor fibers, motor part of your facial nerve, and here your facial nerve is coming out. And as we know, as this enter your internal auditory meatus, yeah, internal auditory meatus, it makes a genu, yeah. Here's the genu. It means just a turn. It makes a turn, and once it makes a turn, this facial nerve, as we know, it gives further branches, which we will be talking further. It gives your two nerves. One is the nerve to your stapedius, yeah, muscle in your inner ear, and one is your in your middle ear, and one is your chorda tympani nerve, yeah, so which we will discuss later in this topic. And the first nerve, which is the first branch of this facial nerve, here we can see the first branch of this facial nerve. So facial nerve, as we know, this area, it's somewhere in your internal acoustic meatus, yeah, in your IAM. So over there, as we know, inside after entering the internal acoustic meatus, internal auditory meatus, we can say it enters and takes a turn. This is the genu. And just over there, it gives a branch. The first branch, it is your greater petrosal nerve. Yeah, this one is your greater petrosal nerve. And this greater petrosal nerve is the one which is your parasympathetic, which is carrying your parasympathetic. All right, so since we are discussing the parasympathetic, here is the greater petrosal nerve is the one which is carrying your parasympathetic. And here we can see this greater petrosal nerve, it goes, and here's the ganglion again. I've drawn in the red. So in this case is the pterygopalatine ganglion. Yeah, in this case is the pterygopalatine ganglion. And as we know, the post-ganglionic fibers would be carried by your trigeminal nerve. So to be more precise, in this case we have, as I already mentioned, pterygopalatine. Here it will be maxillary nerve. Yeah, it would be your V2. So the first branch of the facial nerve here is is called as greater petrosal nerve. Greater petrosal nerve, it goes inside your this pterygopalatine ganglion, which is supported by your topographically structurally by your trigeminal nerve. To be more precise, your maxillary nerve. Yeah, so maxillary nerve would be the one which would be carrying postganglionic fibers. One important thing to remember here is, here I've drawn the internal carotid artery, and as we know, sympathetic fibers from your cervical area, they need to enter your brain, and your all the glands and blood vessels. How they do it? They do it by traveling through your arteries, yeah, your main blood vessels. So in this case, it's your internal carotid arteries. So all the sympathetic fibers from your superior cervical ganglion and cervical areas, sympathetic, they come and they come through your internal carotid artery, and here is the sympathetic fibers, yeah, coming and entering in your brain, and here they enter in your internal acoustic in your brain part. So here it's the greater petrosal nerve, and this one, the sympathetic fibers, here we can name them, it is called as your deep petrosal nerve. Yeah, so one thing to import for the exam purposes is very important. The greater petrosal nerve is the one which is carrying parasympathetic nerve fibers, yeah, parasympathetic fibers, and your deep petrosal nerve is the one which is carrying your sympathetic fibers. Yeah, so one shouldn't confuse great petrosal nerve and the deep petrosal nerve, and one must be familiar with the differences between two of them. The greater petrosal nerve is the one which is carrying the parasympathetic fibers, and the deep petrosal nerve is the one which is carrying the sympathetic fibers. Together, these two connected would be called as your Vidian nerve. Yeah, yeah, you can call them together. They would be called as Vidian nerve. Yeah, and uh, sympathetic, of course, it doesn't synapse. It doesn't have any role in the ganglion, so it doesn't synapse or something. It was your greater petrosal nerve, as I already mentioned, is the one which synapses, and maxillary nerve would be carrying your postganglionic fibers from here onwards, going towards your nasal, lacrimal, palatine, and pharyngeal glands. Yeah, so very important point. One must be familiar with greater petrosal nerve and your deep petrosal nerve. And rest is same. The postganglionic fibers would be carried by trigeminal nerve. In this case, it's the V2, as already mentioned. Cranial nerve 7 and maxillary nerve. Maxillary nerve is your topographically or structurally related to your pterygopalatine ganglion, and the seventh is the one which is related to your functional nerve. So, all right. So for this, hope you understood the pterygopalatine ganglion. Let's go towards the otic ganglion. So again, two nerves, two nerves which are related to the otic ganglion. One would be your functional nerve, one would be your structural nerve. In this case, the functional nerve is your glossopharyngeal nerve, and in this case, the structural or topographic nerve is your mandibular nerve itself. Yeah, it's the V3, V3, yeah, mandibular branch or mandibular nerve or the trigeminal nerve. Mandibular nerve. All right, so V3 and 9. So let's start otic ganglion. So before starting and discussing about the otic ganglion, one must be familiar with the location of the otic ganglion, because for the exam purposes is the frequently asked question about the location of the otic ganglion. So here I've drawn the mandible. Here's the body. Here's the angle of mandible, and here's the ramus of the mandible. So if we take out this whole mandible, mainly the ramus part and the angle part, then we will come and we will be able to see the inferior infratemporal fossa. Sorry, yeah. So infratemporal fossa would be seen. Now in the infratemporal fossa, to reach infratemporal fossa, one must be familiar with few structures. This is your pterygoid plate here. This is your pterygoid plate. This is your maxillary area. This is your eye. This is your nose, and these are maxillary teeth. So this is a pterygoid plate. Now, as we can see in many anatomy books, one can see we have a fissure over here. Here I have drawn. So let's see here, inferior temporal fossa. Then we have this fissure over here, and the fissure I have drawn here. This is the fissure. So first of all, we will counter this fissure. Yeah, this is your palatine maxillary fissure over here. Once we then we take a turn and we go inside this palatine maxillary fissure. Through this fissure, we enter into a fossa. Yeah. Into a foramen, sorry. Yeah, so it will be your palatine pterygopalatine fossa. Yeah, it will be your pterygopalatine fossa over here. So to reach the pterygopalatine fossa, first first thing we will be encountering is your pterygomaxillary fissure. Then we have this pterygopalatine fossa over here, this area. And through this, the third part would be your sphenopalatine foramen, sorry, yeah, sphenopalatine foramen over here, the third one it will be. And through that foramen, we would reach our nasal cavity, yeah. So this is your pterygoid plate. We have the fissure here, yeah, pterygomaxillary fissure over here. Then we have this, your fossa, yeah, pterygopalatine fossa, and then we will have a sphenopalatine foramen over there, through which we will reach our nasal cavity. Before that, one must be familiar with, we have three foramens. Yeah, one is your foramen rotundum, one is your ovale, and one is your spinosum. Yeah, so you can imagine the location. Where is your rotundum? Yeah, here is your greater ring. Yeah, so rotundum is somewhere here. As we know, rotundum carries your V2, and ovale is the one which carries the main trunk of your mandible, of your trigeminal nerve, that is your V3. Yeah, mandibular branch, mandibular nerve is carried through this. And as we know, spinosum carries your MMA, yeah, middle meningeal artery, which which if this area gets fractured, your nerve can bleed and you can have epidural hematoma too. So all right, so this was about the infratemporal fossa. I won't go into much into detail. It was just about the location of the otic ganglion. So otic ganglion is the one which would be located somewhere here, medial to your main trunk, your mandibular branch. Once mandibular branch is coming, your mandibular nerve is coming through this foramen ovale, is coming down. Medial to that, it would be your otic ganglion located. So it was just for the location purposes I've drawn this, and so it gets one must know where your otic ganglion is. Otic ganglion is located. It's a very small structure, very in a millimeter structure. So let's discuss about the otic ganglion. So as we know, as I already said, we have two nerves related to each ganglion. So in this case, we have the functional nerve. It's the glossopharyngeal nerve, and the mandibular nerve is your topographic or structural nerve. So let's start. Here we have your midbrain, here we have your pons, and here we have your medulla oblongata. So in this case, we have the inferior salivary nucleus. Remember, for the pterygopalatine nucleus here, we discuss about the superior salivary nucleus. Yeah. Here we have the inferior salivary nucleus. In this case, it's located in your medulla oblongata. So from here, since we are talking about the otic ganglion, we will discuss, of course, the parasympathetic fibers for the glossopharyngeal nerve, that is your cranial nerve 9. So here the parasympathetic fibers of the cranial nerve 9 coming out of your medulla oblongata, they enter your this glossopharyngeal nerve. It comes out through your jugular foramen, yeah, and your jugular foramen is in your posterior cranial fossa over there located. So it's coming out through your jugular foramen, and once it comes out from your jugular foramen, your glossopharyngeal nerve, it gives a branch. This branch is called as Jacobson nerve. Yeah, Jacobson nerve is a branch of your cranial nerve 9, that is your glossopharyngeal nerve. Yeah. So glossopharyngeal nerve giving a branch named as Jacobson nerve. This Jacobson nerve goes into your middle ear, and in your middle ear it makes a plexus. Yeah, so here you can see a plexus is made in your middle ear. This plexus is made of course, this Jacobson nerve is carrying your parasympathetic fibers, and this plexus is made through your sympathetic nerve fibers too. Yeah, so but overall this plexus is made through your parasympathetic, carried through your Jacobson nerve and your sympathetic fibers. They together make your plexus. This is known as tympanic plexus, located in our middle ear. So this Jacobson nerve, before making a plexus, it is called as Jacobson nerve, and after the plexus, the exiting one is known as your lesser petrosal nerve. Yeah, it is your lesser petrosal nerve. So remember, we have already discussed about three nerves: greater petrosal nerve, deep petrosal nerve, and lesser petrosal nerve. So one must know differences between these three of them. So lesser petrosal nerve, again, it's a parasympathetic. Yeah, so it's not about sympathetic. Only the sympathetic one was the deep petrosal nerve. Lesser petrosal nerve, just like the greater petrosal nerve, is carrying your parasympathetic fibers. Yeah, so lesser petrosal nerve, of course, it would be related to your glossopharyngeal nerve yet. Now, lesser petrosal nerve through the foramen ovale and your main mandibular branch. These two, lesser petrosal nerve, comes out through your foramen ovale, and here's the ganglion. Since we are talking about the otic ganglion, here's the otic ganglion, and I already mentioned this location, otic ganglion. Here is the lesser petrosal nerve, synapses in your otic ganglion, and goes and supplies your parotid gland. Yeah, but question arises, what are the postganglionic fibers? So as I already mentioned, postganglionic fibers would always be carried through your trigeminal nerve. So in this case, we have, how do we call that trigeminal nerve? It has its own name, which is supplying your parotid area, and is called auriculotemporal nerve. Yeah, it's supplying your ear area and temporal area and your parotid gland. So parotid gland is not supplied by auriculotemporal nerve, but is supplying your auricular area and temporal area, but it's only carrying your lesser petrosal nerve, parasympathetic fibers. Yeah, so lesser petrosal nerve is a branch, you can say, of glossopharyngeal nerve, but the postganglionic fibers are carried through ATN. Yeah, so auriculotemporal nerve, which is a of course it will be a branch of, you can say, temporal nerve. Yeah, your temporal nerve. So, and here is your parasympathetic, here is your parotid gland. Yeah, so parotid gland, it's functionally it's getting its supply, parasympathetic supply, through your lower lesser petrosal nerve or glossopharyngeal nerve, you can say. But topographically, this otic ganglion is related to ATN. Yeah, it's related to your auriculotemporal nerve. And here I've drawn MMA, your medial laryngeal artery, which is carrying your sympathetic fibers, and sympathetic fibers also, of course, also supply your parotid gland. So all these are connected, and the main branch over here, you can see the mandibular nerve is coming. So this mandibular nerve is giving a branch known as auriculotemporal nerve. Yeah, so this auriculotemporal nerve is the one which is carrying all these three: your sympathetic, your parasympathetic, and auriculotemporal itself, supplying your parotid gland. Yeah, but remember, auriculotemporal nerve is not supplying, has nothing to do with your temporal gland. Your parotid gland is the parasympathetic one, is your glossopharyngeal, which is the functional one. It is the one which is supplying the parasympathetic, and sympathetic, of course, as we know, coming through your MMA. Yeah, so here we have done with the otic ganglion. Functional is the cranial nerve 9, and the structural one is your mandibular, yeah, V3. And the last one, easy one, the most easiest one, is your submandibular gland. So submandibular gland itself has cranial nerve 7, which is a functional nerve, and we have the lingual nerve, which is your lingual nerve would be your structural nerve here in this case. Structural nerve or topographic nerves. Yeah, so lingual nerve, it's a branch of V3. Yeah, mandibular nerve. So let's start. Again, I've drawn, since cranial nerve 7 is the functional nerve, we will draw again the brain stem, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. Here I've taken pons. So here's the motor unit, motor nucleus. Here is the sensory nucleus coming from the superior salivary nucleus. And here is your nerve to intermedius, and nerve to intermedius joins with your motor part, and they come outside your brain stem. Here entering into the internal acoustic meatus, forming a genu. Yeah, genu. Genu, or also known as the geniculate ganglion. Yeah, but it's a misnomer. It shouldn't be a ganglion, it's just a genu, because it's taking a turn inside after entering your internal acoustic meatus. And as we know, as I already mentioned, one nerve was already, which we discussed about, was your greater petrosal nerve, which we talked about in the pterygopontine ganglion case. The first branch, the second branch would be your nerve to stapes. Yeah. And the third one would be your this cauda tympani, yeah, branch of your facial nerve. So this is the cauda tympani branch of the facial nerve coming, and here we have ganglion, trigeminal ganglion. This is the mandibular nerve. Mandibular nerve gives a branch known as the lingual nerve. Here, mandibular nerve gives a lingual nerve. Now this lingual nerve is would be your topographic nerve. That is, it's structurally related to this this your submandibular ganglion, but it doesn't have nothing to do with your with this ganglion. It just gives a support to this ganglion. So cauda tympani 1 is the one which is carrying your parasympathetic fibers. It enters this ganglion, submandibular ganglion synapses, and supplies your submandibular gland. And further, it through your lingual nerve, this cauda tympani also supplies your sublingual gland. Yeah. So these are the few important points one must be familiar with overall. So we discussed in this topic about your ciliary ganglion, pterygopalatine, otic ganglion, and your submandibular ganglion. The ciliary one is functionally related to the ciliary ganglion is functionally related to your cranial nerve 3 and structurally related to your nasociliary nerve. Pterygopalatine ganglion is functionally related to cranial nerve 7 and is structurally related to your maxillary nerve. The otic ganglion is functionally related to your cranial nerve 9 and structurally or topographically related to your mandibular nerve. And submandibular ganglion is functionally related to your cranial nerve 7, facial nerve, and structurally related to your lingual nerve, which is a branch of your mandibular nerve. So that's all for this topic. Thank you very much.